Am I the a-hole for sending my daughter to school in her pajamas? My 7-year-old daughter Elsie has recently started to make mornings more difficult by throwing a fit. When we ask her to get dressed for school, we've tried setting her clothes out the night before, but she still makes an issue out of it, and she doesn't want to sleep in her clothes, so that's not an option either. My wife leaves for work before me, so I'm normally the one who has to deal with the tantrums in the morning. I woke Elsie up, and as always, she refused to get dressed. I wasn't really in the mood to deal with her B-word, and I didn't have the energy to fight with her about it. So I told her that it was okay and I'll just take her to school in her pajamas. She looked pretty shocked because I don't think it was the outcome she was expecting, but the rest of the morning went a lot smoother than normal. We got in the car and she was more quiet than usual, so I could tell she wasn't really sure what to think of it. But after a while of driving, I guess the realization set in, and she told me she wanted to go home and change. I told her she had already made her decision, and I wasn't driving her back home now. She started freaking out saying she wanted me to drive back home, and she didn't want to go to school in her pajamas. But I wasn't turning the car around, so we arrived at school and she eventually went in. After my wife came home from picking her up from school, she looked pissed. She didn't say anything in front of Elsie, but later in the evening, as expected, she went off on me. She started saying that I had embarrassed her and made us look like bad parents who can't be bothered to dress our daughter. I told her that I'm sure Elsie isn't the first child to go to school in pajamas, and it's not the end of the world. And she wears normal clothes every other day, so one day in pajamas isn't going to make everyone think we're bad parents. She told me she thought it was a cruel thing to do to Elsie, but in my opinion it was harmless and taught her a lesson. So, am I the a-hole?
Here are the top comments.
Not the a-hole. Your daughter was testing boundaries and she learned the limit. If you had turned around, she might have done the same the next day and started a new pattern. By sticking to your decision in a harmless environment when your daughter was in no danger, she learned a lesson about the consequences of her actions. Plenty of kids show up in pajamas, costumes, funky, cool, not funky, smelly, clothes all the time.
Not the a-hole. I'm not a fan of embarrassment as a form of punishment, but I do believe in appropriate teachings that there are consequences to actions. You did not harm your daughter. She chose not to get dressed for her day, and so her day progressed in the clothing she was in. Consequences to her actions.
Not the a-hole. My reasoning is as follows. You made it very clear to her that this was going to happen before you left home, and she accepted this. True, it wasn't until you reached school that reality set in for her, but she isn't a toddler who can't think through consequences very well. I do note that the division here is between the people who think that this is a cruel humiliation and those who think it is a fair consequence for behavior. I imagine it will be very split because it's clearly quite emotive.